Before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to share that QCon London returns April 7 to 9, 2025. Learn what's next from world-class leaders pushing the boundaries. You'll learn actionable insights from senior software developers working on real-world projects across multiple domains. Learn more at qconlondon.com. Good day, folks. This is Shane Hastie for the InfoQ Engineering Culture Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Claire Vaux from LaunchDarkly. Claire, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So my normal starting point in these conversations would be, who's Claire?
That's maybe a question I need to ask myself on a daily basis. Who is Claire? In the context of this conversation, I am Claire Vaux. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at LaunchDarkly. I lead our entire technology organization, so not just engineering, but product management, design, data. I even, pretty surprisingly have a couple sellers on the team for our new incubation products. So I have a pretty broad remit. But functionally, my job is to build a really high-performing team where we can make great investments in R&D and bring great products to our customers and create value for the company.
What is a high-performing team today?
It's a really great question. I mean, for me, I think about performance from the lens of our ultimate goal. And to me, our ultimate goal is to solve hard problems for customers that have value to those customers, that have commercial markets for them, and that can build enterprise value for the company. And so to me, a team that is building towards our ultimate goal, which is really customer-centric and value-driven, is what I like to see in engineering organizations. Of course, we want technical excellence. Of course, we want camaraderie and culture and engagement. Of course, we want innovation. And of course, we want to attract competitive talent. But at the end of the day, that is a means to the end. And we really like to say customer-centric and what we're trying to achieve for our colleagues in the business.
Customer-centric. As an engineer, how do I become customer-centric?
Well, lucky for us, our customers are engineers. So we're in a really privileged spot. LaunchDarkly is the leading feature management experimentation platform in the market. We serve engineers. That's our job. We build dev tools for engineers. We build for builders. That's actually one of the things that attracted me to LaunchDarkly is it's really candidly fun to be able to build for builders, and building technical tools for technical folks is very interesting. So one, whether you eat your own dog food or drink your own champagne, we are power users of LaunchDarkly at LaunchDarkly. We use LaunchDarkly to release, test, optimize our own code in production. We use it for small things, for big things. We use all the features. We take advantage of the full platform. So one of the ways we become customer-centric as an organization is we act as customers. And that's not just the engineering organization. Product managers are expected to use the product. Our designers are expected to use the product. And the product is not just the UI and the web app. It's our SDKs. It's our data export tools, all those things that make up the whole platform. So I would say that's one primary way we're a little advantaged in being customer-centric. But the other way is we stay very close to customers. My expectation in my organization is that everybody's having customer conversations, live, real human-to-human customer conversations every week. That's not just the realm of our salespeople or our customer success team. Engineers need to know their customers that they go to discuss their most challenging skill issues. Product managers need to have a group of customers they can rely on for early feedback on products. And so we really stay close to customers. Then I think the third thing is we really bring a beginner's mindset to our product. LaunchDarkly has been in the market for over 10 years. And in those 10 years, you can build up a lot of tolerance for the sharp edges in your product or the things that you've kind of gotten used to clicking around or hacking around. And I really think it's important for folks to come to their own products with a beginner mindset, look at it with fresh eyes and think, if I knew nothing about LaunchDarkly, would this be easy to do? So those are just a couple ways that we're really customer-centric in my organization.
You said make a great culture? What does that feel like? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's really funny. I have this, fancy C-level title and tend to go into growth and scale stage startups, so much later stage startups. And everybody thinks that I get hired to make teams act like a big company. I come in as the grown-up and I say, okay, this is how you're supposed to run an engineering organization at scale or a product organization at scale, et cetera. And of course, my leaders and my team across the board want to do things to professionalize the way we operate and make sure that we're showing up for customers with stability and pace. All those things are great. And I get hired to remind the team to operate like a startup. So to me, a great culture is one that is very close to customers, that moves fast, where there are builders in the team who want to bring their, technical and intellectual and creative skills to problems people have. And so I think a culture that is very close to how a startup would operate, lower process, lower BS, lower politics, focus on the customer, focus on building, have fun. Those to me are the cultures I thrive in, whether or not that's the best culture or not. That is the culture that I prefer to operate in. And then sort of the non-negotiable is, as I said up front, high performance. All of that does not matter, unfortunately, unless we build great products that have market acceptance that can grow the company to the ambitions that we have. And so I do bring to great cultures a focus on what really is our job, because I think a lot of times teams lose sight of that. They think their job is to do the work that gets them promoted, or their job is to do the work to make them look good in front of executive. And none of that is actually their job. Their job is to help us build a great business and have an impact on users. And I think that centricity about the job to be done is really important in great cultures.
You also, when we were chatting earlier, spoke about a culture of experimentation. How does that play out?
Yeah, so, what I really think is to build great products, you have to be quite hypothesis driven and you have to build, test, iterate over time. One of my things that I say commonly is no genius product managers. And what I mean by no genius product managers is product managers can hone product sense and build intuition and have experience that helps them narrow the surface area of the right problem to solve. But the reality is we have to remain humbled by users and be able to be humbled by the market. And so it is less important to be right out the gate and more important to be fast out the gate and listen to what users say. And so I really do think it's important that we approach every build as a hypothesis. I believe that there's a great market here because what I know is that this data tells us there's an opportunity, and I think we can do X by building Y. That's a perfectly valid hypothesis. And then you have to have two things to make this culture of experimentation work. You have to have real intellectual honesty and accountability. We had a hypothesis. Are we really holding ourselves accountable to that outcome? I'm sure you, like I have been in teams where everybody says, yes, we're going to hit this OKR or this goal, and I have this beautiful strategy and plan to do it. And then you build the beautiful strategy and the plan. In the end, you don't really hit the OKR, and people say, oh, well, there's this excuse and that excuse. But you really have to have a culture of accountability. We said we were going to do something. Did we do it? And if we didn't do it, let's understand the why. The second thing you really have to have is tolerance for failure, which is the organization has to be resilient enough to tolerate getting it wrong. That means people have to be okay with being wrong. They have to be okay with saying, my hypothesis was incorrect. And the organization itself actually has to embrace people that can do that, because those are the folks that have the sort of iterative, scrappy mindset that's really going to get you moving in the right direction with setbacks. And so I think those two things of being sort of like intellectually honest and accountable, coupled with a high tolerance of failure and a hypothesis mindset, in a team that moves fast, you get to the right answer quickly, and then you're pretty unstoppable.
You have both product and engineering under one umbrella. Most
Yes.
organizations don't do that.
More and more are, but this CPTO role is relatively rare. I've actually done it twice now. So, I've had a couple revs at this particular role. Here's where I think it works well. I think the technology team, or at least that's what we call it. Some folks call it EPD, we call it technology. I've worked at other companies that have cute little names for it, but that sort of triad of functional teams Having a singular identity, I think, is really healthy for culture. The idea that engineering and product are inherently at odds, that design is always an afterthought, I don't think that's necessary. I think it is often a reflection of how organizations are run under siloed executives. So I really believe that whether or not it's reporting to me, a singular identity as an organization that represents the R&D investment in a company is very healthy. It creates better collaboration, it creates more innovation, it allows you to identify and overcome friction within teams. It sets a standard talent bar across all those orgs. So I think it's very healthy and I've seen it play out. I also think in certain organizations, it can be really helpful for the CEO, as I say, to have a single person to hold accountability for R&D. Especially if, like at LaunchDarkly, we have a CEO that is not the founder. It can be very, very helpful to have an executive that represents the full investment in R&D, the team, the technology, and the product at the executive level. There's sort of full accountability across that investment, which in most software teams is the biggest investment in the company. So I think from an executive organization perspective, it can be useful. But I think the skill sets are pretty rare and it takes a certain type to be able to do it. I have a technical background. I'm a classic generalist. I've been a founder. I've actually done revs in all these organizations because I myself have the personality of curiosity and learning. I have worked in startups, which means you get exposed to a lot of things. So I've built up the scale operational experience, technical expertise, and strategy experience to be able to operate across all these functions. And then, of course, I have amazing leaders across those teams. But I have people that report to me that say, I never want your job. I don't want the whole thing. That seems kind of hard. So there's definitely folks that love the sort of specialty, SVP product, SVP engineering role. But I do think from an identity perspective, from an R&D investment perspective, and for certain types, it can be a really functional structure for a software company.
Down at the place where the work gets done, how do we get the product and engineering folks working well together?
I think there's a couple things, and you forgot one, design. Everybody always forgets design. So I have to, that's the other thing that I always do is I'm like, D is part of EPD. So, I think there's been a lot of thought around this classic EPD triad, engineering, product, and design as shepherds for building a product experience. I think that continues to be true, but down at the team level, how do you actually make that happen? Well, one, I do think you have to have true triad level accountability and parity on teams. So product doesn't lead everybody else. Product engineering and design jointly are the leads for an initiative. And then the second thing that I think folks forget that we do culturally is that doesn't mean they're siloed. That means they're a cohesive unit. And we have a operating principle in our technology organization called there are no lanes. And what do we mean by there are no lanes? You don't stay in your lane and you don't expect others to stay in their lane. There are no lanes. We have a shared goal. We are a team. We have skills that vary. And if it makes sense for me to help in your lane, I have permission and accountability to do so. And so there's some pretty interesting examples of this in this new world of AI where designers can start to build code and prototypes, and engineers can start to generate product requirements, and product managers can start to wireframe and do some really interesting design work with these AI tools. And rather than saying, no, that's design's job or no, that's product job, what we're embracing is this flexible creativity and skill set in our teams, which allows us to move faster and build ultimately better products. So those are kind of the two things. I think parity at the lead level and then real embrace of this one team mindset.
You touched on AI.
Yep.
What is happening with the adoption of, and we're in many ways very early in the AI revolution, but what's happening in that team level you mentioned using some of the tools?
It's a combination of tremendous excitement and a slow pace of adoption. And so, I have a very unique point of view on this. I am probably what one would call an AI maximalist. I am not very risk averse around this topic. I think, in fact, most teams are moving too slow against becoming more AI driven or AI native. We've been fairly aggressive in our adoption and experimentation. And again, there's that word experimentation, our experimentation with different AI tools, because I really believe that fundamentally how software is built is changing. And I don't mean over 10 years, I mean over 18 months. It is just night and day. The cost of building is collapsing. The way we build is collapsing. The tools we use are changing. And, I really take the approach that I should not build for example, engineering organization of January 2025. I should not build that team. I should think, cast forward 5 or 10 years. What is this team actually going to look like? How are they going to operate? What is the world going to look like? And work back into what do we need to do now to be world class then? So I'm really, really very much on the edge. I think what's happening at the ends, at the leaf, is experimentation and pilots. So I think there is increasing acknowledgement that, for example, coding co-pilots and coding agents have a place in the stack. There is a risk and compliance framework that can accept these as part of scaled engineering organizations. So you can get over that hurdle, both from a security and an IP perspective, relatively well at this point, especially with the larger foundation model providers. And then it's, well, what the heck do I do with this thing and how does it change how we work? And my general approach has been to, one, allocate budget to it. So I don't think you can experiment without money. So we put aside money for it. Even if it gets wasted, it's worthwhile because we learn. Two, name people accountable for every experiment and have them articulate what the outcome of that experiment would be. And then three, it's funny to say internally, but build in public, which is we are very open with our experimentation in using these AI tools. We share the good, we share the bad. We have a Slack channel called Project Building with AI. People post, I tried to have Cursor do this and it was amazing. I tried to have Devin do that and it failed. I tried to use V0 to do this and it was amazing. I tried to have ChatGPT do that and it failed. Like that sort of very open and, again, intellectually honest assessment allows us to identify opportunities to really transform how we build products here at LaunchDarkly. So I think there will be increasing excitement. I am definitely driving it both tops down and bottoms up, and we're seeing real value. So there's a there.
So you mentioned building the team for 3, 5, 10 years. What is that team going to be?
Oh, I have so many opinions on it. My real hypothesis is that teams will largely be led by what I'm calling the AI-powered triple threat, somebody who is fluent enough across technology, product, and design to actually take those 3 roles and collapse them into one and be a singular leader for a team or a business unit. I think that model is really starting to show up in my mind, and it'll be interesting to see if it actually shows up in organization charts. I think you will have teams that are combinations of humans and agents orchestrating across workflows. And I think those teams will be building a lot of product. So I actually, in addition to being an AI maximalist, I'm an optimist. I think technology has generally only pushed us forward in the world and building sort of an amazing world with amazing product and amazing economic impact and therefore amazing human impact. And so I think we'll see a lot of really, really neat things be built, but I think the shapes of the teams are going to look so different.
What do we need to do to help the people of today become those team members?
One, we need to invest in learning and development. Like this is a real upskilling moment. And it's really funny to take teams where folks have spent a tremendous amount of time in their academic training and then their professional training. These are senior engineers and staff engineers and principal product managers who are so adept in what they do and say, guess what? You are actually not going to know how to do your job in 2 years. And I need to reskill you in how this is actually going to look. So I do think there's this learning and development motion that needs to happen. And then I think there is cultural things that if you do not have, it will make it very hard for you to get here. And again, there are things that I have said are important before, and I'll continue to say you have to have a culture of experimentation. You have to be willing to try things. You have to have a willingness to fail and admit where things are working and where they're not. And then you have to, I think, in general, have an optimistic outlook. People can get very afraid about how changes will impact their jobs, their livelihoods. I think it is naive to ignore that and claim that that is not something that is on people's minds. And at the same time, I think leaders have the opportunity to frame and build companies that have tremendous upside for the individuals that participate in them, and professional, personal, economic, just core satisfaction. But I don't think if leaders ignore that piece of it, they will be very successful.
You mentioned reskill. You mentioned the culture. What are the skills?
So there's a couple things that I think about. One, there is actually, from a technical perspective, if you're talking about engineering, understanding how these models operate, how they operate inside products, what their tool sets are. And there's functionally this whole world of like AI engineering. That I think is a skill that like technically needs to be built in both product engineering and design teams. That is just a whole new surface area of how we build software. It's very different. The second skill is how do I build alongside copilots, agents, and AI-enabled tools? And what's really interesting is it is muscle memory you have to break, not value you have to prove. And so what I mean by that is, simple example, everybody knows if they go to ChatGPT, they can accelerate some part of their day. I think people have generally accepted that. They've proven it to themselves. They just forget to go to ChatGPT. Like they forget to make that part of their workflow because they're so used when I have a task to do, this is the place I go to do it. And then I'm, 75% down the path and I'm almost done, so I'll just do it. And so I do think there's this workflow operations model that you really have to, somebody went to lunch, called it like whole team behavior modification. You really have to get the whole team to start doing handoffs and work in a very different way. I think that's pretty interesting. And then, the third thing is there are these tools themselves that have a learning curve. And let's just take, for example, one of these AI-powered IDEs like Cursor. People get bad outcomes from Cursor because they don't use Cursor well, because they have not learned to use a conversational coding copilot well. There's setup you have to do. There's practices you have to do. And so I think there is actually learning the tools themselves enough to get value out of them that I also think is very important.
But those tools are changing so fast.
Yeah, but they feel like the skills are replicable across tools.
A lot of good stuff there. What haven't I asked you that I should have done?
One of the things that I don't think we talked about is, maybe how it's going to change geography and how teams are composed across time zones and what it means. I mean, you and I are speaking from quite a distance. And, post-COVID, we've gone through this radical reimagining that what work looks like. And I think that AI itself will have impacts on who you hire, where you hire, when they work, how they work. I actually had a moment this morning, so I'm pretty experimental and I use Cognition Labs Devin Copilot. And this morning it was so funny because it works synchronously, right? It does planning and it's an agent. So it works synchronously. It's working and clicking off tasks, but it is a copilot in some extent. And so occasionally Devin will ask me, hey, can you review this PR? Or I need this environment variable set up, all those sorts of things. And I was thinking there's this challenge of this agent can work sort of an infinite time space. And I myself am limited by my body. And I actually said to Devin this morning, it was so funny. I said, hey, just so you know, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. I'll be back later. If you need something, I'm not going to be here. And it got my brain thinking that I think organizations are not prepared for how operationally this will cascade out across their orgs. And they're not playing those sort of like game theory games of if 10% of my engineering workforce actually becomes an agent, do I need to like follow the sun coverage on my human engineering team to keep that agent team productive? And maybe I push it really far and I think about the future more than other folks do. But if you're, for example, San Francisco based or a US based team, how you set up your team to operate alongside agents can be a competitive advantage and a strategic advantage that I don't know if enough technology leaders are thinking through. So I know you're the people person, and soon enough you will be the people plus agent person. I'm presuming that you said I spend my time with the humans, and you're going to spend your time with humans and the prototype humans. But it is really something very interesting to think about the human interactions, both from a collaboration perspective as just candidly the operational perspective is something I think leaders need to consider.
Wow. Claire, thanks very much. If people want to continue the conversation, where do they find you?
I am on X, and of course, I am on LinkedIn, Claire Vogt.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.